Alrighty. Day 2, intelligence. Okay, I'm going to show you, have you seen the movie Inside Out? This is a clip from it. My volume up. And it has to do with intelligence. So I want you to kind of figure out how you think it deals with it. Okay? Nope, not what I meant to do. Let's do that. There we go.
My rocket! Wait! Randy and I were still using that rocket. It still has some strong power left. Who's your friend who likes to play? No! No, you can't take my rocket to the top! Randy and I go to the moon! Randy can be done with me.
Hey, it's gonna be okay. We can fix this. We just need to get back to headquarters. Which way to the train station?
I had a whole trip planned for us.
Hey, it's ticklish, huh? Here comes the tickle monster. I'm sorry they took your rocket. They took something that you loved. It's gone. Forever. Sadness. Don't make him feel worse. Sorry.
It's all we had left of Riley.
I bet you and Riley had great adventures.
Oh, they were wonderful. Once we flew back in time, we had breakfast twice that day.
Sadness! Sounds amazing. I bet Riley liked it.
Of course she did. We were best friends.
Yeah, it's sad.
I'm okay now. Come on. The train station is this way.
Alright. So, what do you think? What does that have to do with intelligence? Alright, well, there is a kind of a buzzword out there called emotional intelligence. Have you heard of that before? It became a big buzzword in the business world. But it can definitely be used in all realms. So, what is emotional intelligence? So based off of that, I don't remember the characters' names, but that little dude's ability to understand kind of the emotion of somebody else, and instead of the other girl tried to like tickle him or whatever, that would be an example of emotional intelligence. So here's the definition. It's the ability to perceive, understand, and use emotions. So there's 3 different parts there. One is picking up on emotions, right? The other one is understanding somebody else's and understanding your own, and then being able to use emotions. So they've done this big study with businesses, because I said it's big in the business world. And they found out that in all different kind of realms of the business world, that people with higher emotional intelligence were able to succeed more in whatever kind of business they had. If it was sales, right? That makes sense. If you're selling something, if you're understanding somebody's emotion there. And they found out that people that tended to be up in leadership positions had a higher emotional intelligence. So if you think about your own kind of future desires of if it's business or if it's medicine or whatever it is, emotional intelligence probably is going to help you kind of rise up in the industry. And hopefully, if you guys are in AP Psychology, that means you're interested and that you understand this a little bit more. So I think you already have a little head start here. Here's kind of a little phrase. IQ can get you a job, but EQ makes sure you keep it. Make sense? So it's just some components of this are 1, perceiving emotion. So just kind of think about your own self here. Can you recognize emotions in faces well, or in music and stories? But some people just really don't pick up on it a lot. I have a particular person in mind that's coming to mind. Can't tell you who. It's not my husband. Okay. Understanding emotions. Okay, first part is picking up, and now it's, okay, well, understanding all the complexities and emotion, and wait, I thought she was happy, but now the girl's crying. Right, boys here? You ever had that happen? I really thought she was happy, and now she's, like, angry. Okay. Then, managing your emotions, especially if it's like anger or sadness. I mean, think about this in the work world. That's why a lot of people can get fired, because they can't express correctly, appropriately, and use emotion. So it is good to use emotion in the workplace, but when and how and what's the best way to do that, right? As a teacher, for example, what's the best way for me to use emotion? When is it okay? I probably shouldn't, like, go off crazy on people. Probably shouldn't just cry every day, right? But hopefully there's times where maybe it's empathizing with students, or kind of speaking up if there's ever a problem with my bosses or anything like that. Anyway, I think this part's fascinating because I like the business relationship there. Okay, so that's EQ. All right. I'm going to give you like 5 true or falses. Let's see what you think. Number 1. The larger your brain is, the smarter you are. Okay. Number 2. Being in school longer allows you to grow more synapses, which makes you smarter. I'm not giving you answers if you can't tell. Number 3, the left side of your brain processes spatial input. The right side processes mathematical input. We've already talked about that early chapter 2 or something. Do you remember? 4, more intelligent people tend to process information quicker. And then 5, just because you can't think fast doesn't mean you're not smart. I don't know why I read it like that. Okay, I'm going to give you some research here, and then we'll go back over these and see what the answers are. Alright, here we go. That doesn't make sense. Is intelligence neurologically measured? Okay, whatever. Okay, so some things I found. Brain anatomy. There is a positive 0.33 correlation between brain size and intelligence score. So, like people with bigger heads, by the way, is different than a bigger brain. Let's make that clear. Like Albert Einstein was found to have a bigger, I think, parietal lobe. And so does that kind of show that relationship? Alright? People that are smarter tend to be able to have more plasticity. Remember we talked about brain plasticity? Like if a part of your brain gets damaged, it's able to take over the parts of another brain part. But in general, people that are smarter are able to grow more connections. Alright, function. The left side is verbal. Remember we talked about that. That's definitely a should remember for the AP test. Left side is verbal. I don't know if you remember the people that got their, what's it called? The connection hemispheres. Corpus callosum or callosum. Cut. Remember they could see things, but they couldn't say that they saw things because it didn't get over to their left side. So left is verbal, and actually both sides they found to have spatial kind of abilities. So is the brain localized with certain abilities? Yes and no is the answer. Okay. Neurological speed. Alright, this one's interesting to me. People who process information faster tend to have a higher intelligence. And the reason for that probably is because if you're processing things faster, you're getting more into your brain, right? So, you know those people, some people, I'm going to include myself here, sometimes I need to like reread it a couple times. Sometimes I need to, it takes me a second to understand and get there, right? So it's going to take me longer. Whereas some people will read it once, boom, it's in their head. Right? They memorized it. Or they understand it. Okay? And then perceptual speed. There is a positive 0.4 correlation between intelligence and perceptual speed. So neurological speed is just kind of how quickly it can transfer neurologically information. But here, this is now understanding, perceiving information. So I think my best example of this is I get so frustrated. So Mr. Marchman and I were really cool. Sometimes we watch Jeopardy. And he would freaking shout out the answer before I even was able to think about it or finish the question. So his perceptual speed is higher than mine, right? Now, to be fair, now that we've watched and practiced Jeopardy more, I kind of understand how to do it faster. You just skim it and look really good to the end of the question. But there are people, perceptual speed allows them to be more intelligent. Okay? Okay, so let's go back to our true and false. 1, the larger your brain is, the smarter you are. True, kind of. Being in school longer allows you to grow more synapses, which makes you smarter. More synapses tend to be higher intelligence. True. Left side of your brain processes spatial input. Right, mathematical. False. More intelligent people tend to process information quicker. True. Just because you can't think fast doesn't mean you're not smart. That's subjective. Right? Smart is subjective. So, I'm not giving you an answer on that one. Okay? Okay. Okay, so now that we've talked about different types of intelligence and theories, well, how do you measure it, right? How do you assess it? Yeah, I just said that. Thanks. So today, if you think about nowadays, our culture, how do we assess it? Testing, right? All different types of testing. The one you guys are most familiar with, the SAT. That is supposed to assess your intelligence. What do you think of it? You think it is accurate? You think it's a good measure? Do you think it predicts what it's supposed to predict? I wish I could hear your answers because I'm actually fascinated by that. A lot of people, and just in general, are like, no, I hate it because it sucks. But is it still a good measure of intelligence, right? I know some schools have gotten rid of these testing. I think Wake is one, where they'd rather use school grades and interviews and stuff like that. Okay, so let's talk about kind of the history of testing and then where it is today. So really it all started with these two guys, Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon, in France. And the reason that they started doing it was because public education became a law, similar to how it did in America. But they needed to figure out what people didn't really fit into that public education system and should instead be in special education. So they came up with a measurement of mental age. And what that means is basically you have a chronological age. You guys are 17 or 18, right? And you should be performing at your chronological age, right? You should be performing like a 17-year-old. For example, a 5-year-old should not be performing like a 10-year-old, right? And so ideally they match up there. Their mental age should be kind of their chronological age. So an 8-year-old should score like an 8-year-old. And so what they did is they came up with questions that age should know, and then were able to kind of find out which kids did or did not fit into that grade. Okay? Then you get an American kind of jump in. Lewis Terman worked at Stanford, and he's going to kind of edit that Binet's idea and call it the Stanford-Binet test. And so he came up with what we know as IQ, or intelligence quotient. This is basically a quantitative way to measure your intelligence. Okay? So this is a formula here that you have to memorize. IQ equals mental age over chronological age times 100. Okay? So I always remember M over C, like multiple choice. I don't know, just helps me. Maybe that will help you. Okay? So let me give you an example here. An average child should have an IQ of 100. An average child, right? Because their mental age, how well they perform, are they performing like a 10-year-old? Right? Or are they performing like a 15-year-old in their scores? Divided by their chronological age. The chronological is 10. If the kid is 10 and they're performing like a 10-year-old, then that's 10 over 10 is 1 times 100 is 100. Right? So an average child IQ would be 100. Now, this does not work for adults. Does that make sense? Because once you get to a certain point, your intelligence doesn't really keep growing like it does as you're a kid, even though your age does, right? So like, when you're watching this, I'll be 32. My birthday's coming up. Thank you very much. I'm 32, but my mental age might be the same as a 42-year-old or a 28-year-old, right? It's not really going to grow that much. And so if you put that in there, like a chronological age of a 32 with a mental age of a 28, right? Then I'm going to slowly, as the years go on, my IQ is going to drop. So does that make sense why it doesn't work? Okay. Here's your question. I want you to figure out what is the IQ here. What's our IQ score? Alright, you ready? Answer? It's 50. So, they like to ask questions like this, so you do need to know that. But they're not going to require a calculator. Okay? Alright, cool. So, I said the average age here is a 100. Okay, so here's your 100. Give me a pen, that's fine. Okay? Because chronological and mental age, right? Okay. Now, we've done this kind of before. 68% of people fall within what? 1 standard deviation above, 1 standard deviation below. So that's most people, 68% of people fall within 1, right? But then you get a little bit more up here, a little bit more up here. So between 70 and 130, that's 95%. Now we're going to talk later kind of more about up here, but this is really where your geniuses are. Okay, so that's kind of my IQ range. And then we're going to talk about this. Anything below 70 is considered having a mental disability. Okay? Okay. Okay. Almost done here. So, other types of tests, okay? An aptitude test is intended to predict your ability to learn a new skill in the future. Okay? So, it's a predictive test. Alright, whereas achievement test is saying, well, what do you already know? Okay, show me what you already know. So like the test at the end of this chapter, that's a what do you already know. It's an achievement test. Okay, and aptitude is trying to predict for the future. Alright, so here's your SAT scores. So what do you think? There we go. Is the SAT an aptitude or achievement test? Well, you have to ask yourself, what is it used for? Okay, what is it used for? And this one's a little bit tricky, but the SAT is supposed to predict how well you will do in college, right? And so that's why the Harvards of the world only want people that do very, very, very well on the SAT because their classes are the most challenging. Achievement test would be your AP test at the end of the semester, right? That's an achievement test. Fun fact, SAT, just so you know, it does a pretty good job of predicting. Pretty good job at predicting. For the most part, even though you don't like it. Now, so we're talking about the IQ test. It doesn't really work for adults, right? Well, David Wechsler came up with the WAIS, okay, the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale. And basically, this is an IQ test for adults. And it's the most widely used intelligence test. And if you kind of look on there, it's got all these different components to it. Verbal, working memory, perceptual, processing speed, all kinds of stuff. Okay? And they also came up with a kids version called the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for children, for preschoolers, and some I think private schools even use this. Like, for example, Heritage, I don't think they use the WISC here, but they do have an intelligence test for kids once they come into or applying for Heritage. Okay? Just so you know, the WAIS in general, it's measuring your overall intelligence, but there are 11 little subtests or sub-areas. So I don't know if you can see this. No, that's not good. They're measuring verbal, and then they measure performance, and then they measure pictures and numbers. So there's all these different components. Now, what would you assume if a kid did well on kind of all the areas except, let's say, verbal comprehension? What's your assumption there if you are administering the test? Well, probably one conclusion would be, well, maybe they have some kind of either reading disability. Dyslexia is often kind of found out because of something like this, if you're dyslexic. Anyway, here's some of the questions kind of that you would get with the WAIS. And this is timed, right? Put these pieces together. Eggs cost 60 cents a dozen. What does one egg cost? That kind of thing. Do you think you can do that? Cool. Okay. So now we've talked all about tests. She's gonna give you the World War I intelligence test, and this was kind of the first mass-produced intelligence test in America before World War I to see who could be in the Army or not. And so we'll see how you do, and then after that, if there's time, there's a genius test. It's called Mensa, and it's not secret, organization for very, very smart people. Actually, no one person in it. And they meet, they meet. My friend doesn't go to it, but, and basically the idea is you should surround yourself by smart people, but you have to take a test in order to get in. So here's a modified version of that test as well. Okay? Alrighty, see ya.